It's never been more important for me to wait till Saturday to do these videos because this week we have tons of injuries, more than we've had all year. So I always wait till Saturdays to go through every single matchup to find the must start and sit wide receivers for any week in fantasy, and we're doing the same for this week. And I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who works on a Saturday to get you this type of content to help you win. So please go down there and drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. Now, getting into our first matchup, it's the Minnesota Vikings and the Cleveland Browns overseas for one of these morning games. Make sure your lineup is set on Saturday night or early Sunday morning. But Justin Jefferson, I would say, is still on that fringe of must start. Because he has Carson Wentz again this week, I do have more confidence in him. I think Carson Wentz is a better quarterback right now for him than it would be if J.J. McCarthy was there. Now, I do think the Browns defense, they may be good, they might not be good. I think we'll find out a lot this weekend because it's not like the Vikings are some high-powered offense. But Justin Jefferson, him getting targeted like that last week, having Jordan Addison back to open things up like he did last week, I think it's still a good matchup with Carson Wentz. So he's still on that fringe of must-starts, and I'll include him in that must-start category. And I would say Jordan Addison is a better option than either of the Cleveland wide receivers, even without Cedric Tillman in this game. I think Jordan Addison is just a big play threat. He's a really good NFL wide receiver too on an NFL team. And I don't think for fantasy, for example, that having a quarterback like Carson Wentz or J.J. McCarthy is good for him. I think there will be disappointing games, and it could be very well this game that he disappoints us. But Jordan Addison is still better than the Cleveland options to me because they just have a new quarterback as well. They're going to have a worse quarterback carousel this year than the Vikings will. So it's going to be a disaster, I think. I think Dylan Gabriel will play a lot more conservative than Joe Flacco would play. So Jerry Jeudy, yes, while he's in theory the wide receiver one, I just don't have much confidence in getting many targets down the field from Dylan Gabriel as I would have if it was Joe Flacco. And I will say this, you can play Isaiah Bond. If you don't know who this is a rookie wide receiver out of the University of Texas. Actually a good prospect, but obviously dropped in the draft to nobody because he had a lot of bad allegations for him. The Browns have him now because they're attracted to those kind of players, I think. But he is a good player, and he has kind of been involved over the couple of weeks. Now with Cedric Tillman out, I will say if you are considering really deep options right now, Isaiah Bond should be in the mix for those options. The Dallas Cowboys at the New York Jets is our next matchup, and George Pickens is a must-start, and Garrett Wilson is a must-start. The only comment I'll make about Garrett Wilson, because I think George Pickens is an obvious must-start we don't need to talk about, Garrett Wilson is just doing it regardless of who his quarterback is. He's just a top-tier talent, and I've been slow to the party on this one. It's time to must-start Garrett Wilson because this matchup this week is beautiful. And Jalen Tolbert, because of the injury to Kevontae Turpin, is now flexible. I did not like Jalen Tolbert. I get it. He had a lot of targets last week. He's just not that good of a player, and one that I just don't care if he sees 10 targets or 5 targets. Most of the time, I'm not going to consider him very flexible, but I do think he is flexible this week because it's either him or Ryan Flanoy, who I do consider on that edge of flexible because of the matchup again versus the Jets. It's a good one. But I'm going to end up sitting Ryan Flanoy and telling you guys I would play Jalen Tolbert over Ryan Flanoy. But again, this matchup could in theory be good for Ryan Flanoy or Jalen Tolbert. So it's just a matter of who is going to be the better option. And just because of target share, I will give the nod to Jalen Tolbert. Now our next matchup is the New York Giants at the New Orleans Saints. And this is an interesting one with a lot of playable options. I would say 2 wide receivers from each team are very playable. Chris Olave is definitely the best. His target share has been through the roof, and he has just been a really solid play for the majority of the season this year. So I think that him being the clear wide receiver one in New Orleans definitely constitutes the best play in this matchup. And then I would say Darius Slayton is still ranked over Wan'Dale Robinson for me. 1 spot difference. They're very close. It's a gut call for me. But the reason I like Slayton better is because of the downfield opportunities I think he'll get compared to Wan'Dale. I think Wan'Dale continues to be more of a slot guy who gets a lot of short targets, whereas Darius Slayton is, I guess, the closest thing to Malik Neighbors who can actually go down the field and produce over the middle of the field. I don't see that as much with Wan'Dale. I think that's more of a Darius Slayton role, so I think we'll see more fantasy see upside from Slayton, but I could easily be wrong, and that's why they're one spot difference. And then Rashid Shaheed, I think, is also flexible. If you look at the targets, they've been there. It's just not actually working out for big plays yet for Rashid Shaheed, but it easily could. I think that he's definitely still playable in this matchup as well, but not as good as the Giants' options. I would easily play Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson over Rashid Shaheed, but I would play Rashid Shaheed over someone like Jalen Tolbert in the previous matchup with the Cowboys. The Las Vegas Raiders at the Indianapolis Colts is our next matchup as well, and Michael Pittman's a must start. He went through a period of time yesterday where we did not know if he was going to play because he popped up on the Thursday injury report, but he's back. It's fully official. He's going to play on this game. So I am going to play Michael Pittman in this game because the Raiders are a great matchup. And he's just looked really solid. I mean, he's like Courtland Sutton in a way to where it's going to be very consistent target share for the most part. But I think the difference here is that his quarterback doesn't go away from him like Bo Nix sometimes does with Courtland Sutton, who we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I think Michael Pittman Jr. is a must start because this matchup is fantastic. And then you go to the Las Vegas Raiders side, and Jacoby Myers still is a really good play. I mean, the guy still sees basically 10 targets on a per game basis. Last week it didn't work out. Geno Smith, I said this a couple weeks ago, and he did exactly this. He's a bounce back candidate. Every week that he has one of those terrible weeks where he throws 3 picks, usually he'll bounce back. I said it a couple weeks ago, he bounced back, and I'm kind of saying it this week, less to an extent though, because I think the Raiders actually are in a tougher matchup this time around with the Colts, so I would say it's less of a chance that he bounces back fully, but either way, I think he'll bounce back and play better than he did last week, and Jacoby Myers with the target share is a really good flex option. Trey Tucker, I would play him over both Colts receivers because Alec Pierce is out, so obviously opportunity opens back up for Adonai Mitchell and Josh Downs. I would still play Trey Tucker, though. I think that Trey Tucker has been more involved on a consistent basis than those other 2 wide receivers in Indianapolis. And I think that with Josh Downs, like he's just not getting enough downfield work. He's becoming that Wan'Dale Robinson in a bad way in this offense with the Colts. And Adonai Mitchell is definitely the guy that hits the big plays but doesn't see the volume nearly as much as Josh Downs does. So this is actually kind of the perfect poll to post on FS Roundup to determine who you should start in this matchup between Trey Tucker, Josh Downs, and Adonai Mitchell. So I'll go ahead and post this poll. Let's look up Josh Downs really quick. Go to chat, go to week 5, and then add Trey Tucker and Adonai Mitchell to this list as well. Post this poll, get live results from everybody else on who you should start in this particular situation if you're really grasping for straws as a deep flex option. This is completely free, by the way. You can post a start-sit poll, get live results from everybody else in the community on what you should do with your decision, and also go help other people out as well. Be helpful to everybody else while you're trying to get your results and help them out with their decisions as well. Again, completely free. But if you want a full team breakdown from me and my opinions on what you should do with trades, waiver wire acquisitions, a full team breakdown is available when you become a full customer at FS Roundup when you sign up for the premium subscription tier. And after that 12-day free trial period is over, I will break down your team once payment processes and you are an official customer with us at fsroundup.com.
Ted desperately needs to pick up a new running back, or his fantasy team is toast. And losing his season again means one thing. Oh, no. Don't be Ted. Automate your waiver pickups with Fantasy Football Roundup.
Now, going to our next matchup, it's the Miami Dolphins at the Carolina Panthers. And I got to say, Ted McMillan is still a play that I would make over Jalen Waddle. Again, this is a great poll to put in the FS Roundup right now to see what you should do, because I've seen a lot of polls about Jalen Waddle this week, and a lot of people seem to be leaning that way. I'll tell you the reason I'm not is because every game we have seen Jalen Waddle get targets at or basically just beyond the line of scrimmage. Ted McMillan, all of his faults with the quarterback, is getting targets down the field. So he has more upside to me in this offense because they're both number ones at this point. But one of those guys gets targets down the field. Maybe Jalen Waddle starts to get more targets down the field, but until I see it, I'm going to play Tet over Jalen Waddle. But they're both relatively good flex options. And Malik Washington, I think he's a deep shot that you could take. Malik Washington with Tyreek Hill was more involved. Now without Tyreek Hill, I expect to see him maybe take a little bit of a Waddle role in this offense where he gets a lot of targets at the line of scrimmage and maybe some in the red zone as well. I think he is definitely playable, and keep an eye on Nick Westbrook-Ikine. That's the other name to mention in this Miami offense. He'll be more of a deep threat if they start pushing the ball down the field, but someone I would play in this matchup before I played Xavier Legette, who is garbage at football. The Denver Broncos at the Philadelphia Eagles is our next matchup, and nobody's must start. I've said this all week. I think Courtland Sutton is a risk in this game. I think that Courtland Sutton, we could look at very easily the 3 games out of the 4 and say he's a must start always. And most of the time, in most situations, I'm not going to tell you to sit Sutton. But what I will say is I don't consider him as good of a must start as someone like Michael Pittman or Garrett Wilson in this game, because I think he'll draw a lot of Quinyon Mitchell, and Quinyon Mitchell is quickly becoming one of those corners in the league that I always keep an eye on when it comes to wide receiver matchups in fantasy. I think there's a chance that Courtland Sutton gets kind of phased out of this game a little bit, and Troy Franklin becomes a really good play. So he is very flexible in this game, but I would still not play Troy Franklin over A.J. Brown, over Devonta Smith, because we all know the upside with those guys is very, very high. But these guys, neither of them made the top 30 this week. I got barked out a couple times, which I don't know why. I mean, this is an offense that's clearly not favoring the passing game right now, so it's really bizarre to see the pushback that I got for it, but whatever. That's a lot of yahoos that come in and try to take advantage of an opportunity. We'll see if they do good, but against the Denver Broncos, I don't see A.J. Brown avoiding Pat Surtain for enough time for him to make any plays, and Devonta Smith could be the guy that you want, but either way, these matchups against the Denver Broncos and Jalen Hurts' reluctance to throw the ball right now, not adding up for me very well. The Houston Texans at the Baltimore Ravens is our next matchup, and Nico Collins is must start. It has been disappointing, and I can tell you that from experience. I've got him in a dynasty league. He's been a little disappointing, but Nico Collins still is a massive big play threat, and this matchup is amazing. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens, they just can't do anything right defensively right now. They're dealing with tons of injuries on the back end, on the front end. I don't see how Nico Collins doesn't have a big game in this matchup, so he is absolutely a must start. Zay Flowers, I still think is a relatively decent flex option. I really, really do. Cooper Rush is not that bad of a backup quarterback, and ironically, the moment Lamar left the game last week, Zay Flowers started getting tons of targets. So it would not cross my mind in the weirdest of ways that Zay Flowers has a decent game in this one. I think he won't draw as much Derek Stingley as many people would think, because he'll play a lot out of the slot and they'll move this guy around quite a bit. So I think that Zay Flowers actually could have a sneaky good game in this one. But of course, without Lamar, I don't see the amount of upside that he could get as much as he did in a week 1 game versus the Buffalo Bills with Lamar Jackson. I think his upside is capped, but I think he could be a solid play. And I would say those are the only 2 playable options. Realistically, I would probably end up playing Jaden Higgins before I played Rashad Bateman, Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, mostly because I don't think any of those guys offer much upside with the quarterback situation, and because Christian Kirk, I just don't think it's that good of a player. We saw Jaden Higgins get in the end zone last week. Maybe they start to use him more, but it's not enough to the point where I would consider him flexible over a guy like Darius Slayton, for example, in the New York Giants offense. The Tennessee Titans at the Arizona Cardinals is our next matchup here, and I don't think any must-starts are in here. I get it, Marvin Harrison Jr. last week was fun, but it really wasn't up until the 4th quarter. I mean, people have a very short memory. Marvin Harrison Jr. was in danger of having one of the worst games we've ever seen, and I think it's just who he is. I think he's a head case of a player, not in the bad way where it's like he's just a problem to the team, but in the worst way of mental side and confidence issues. I think he'll continue to struggle with that. So I don't think of him as some must start against a good match of the Tennessee Titans, even though in theory it should be a really good one. I think he's definitely playable, but he's not a must start to me because I'm not sure if I'll ever see him that way, to be honest with you. I just don't know if that's him. Elick Manor is definitely a better option than Calvin Ridley at this point. He is. He's the wide receiver 1 in Cam Ward's eyes. He's got much more confidence with Cam Ward than Calvin Ridley does. And Calvin Ridley also dealing with injury right now. As of the time of this filming, we don't even know if he's going to play in this game. So Elick Manor, from all accounts, is a better play. And you can't play either of the other Arizona wide receivers, I don't think. There's just not enough upside for either one of those guys. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Seattle Seahawks is our next matchup. Jackson Smith-Njigba, you play him. Emeka Egbuka, you play him as well. Chris Godwin, high-end start. Yes, I have kind of been ragging on him a little bit this week. Not because I don't like him, but because of the fact that he got 10 targets and it didn't amount to much. It's just going to take time, I think, for him to be able to maximize those targets, and I don't think we're there yet against the Seahawks for sure. Like, this is a really tough matchup, and a matchup that I ranked Emeka Egbuka lower than I would like to because of how difficult this matchup is. But that being said, Baker Mayfield's just too good. The Bucs offense is just too good not to put up points in this matchup right here. And Chris Godwin, again, you can't overlook 10 targets that he got in his first week back. So even if he's only a fraction better than what he was last week, it'll still add up to a flexible opportunity here for Chris Godwin. And I'm not playing Cooper Kupp, but I will play Torrey Horton, who I think will continue to develop a role in this offense, but he is not a high-end start. He's not a mid-end flex play. He is definitely a lower-end flex play for now, but I do have my eyes on him in a big way, continuing to develop a role in this offense in Seattle. The Detroit Lions at the Cincinnati Bengals is such an obvious play for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. Let's move on. Jamar Chase, high-end flex. It's so hard to tell. Like, I would play him over Jameson Williams because my fundamental belief is the Bengals know they have to get to Jamar the ball, so they will, but it's going to be really hard to know if it's going to work out. I mean, last week they targeted him a bunch, and same thing with T. Higgins. Well, it just doesn't work right now. And the Lions defense is another tough matchup, so it could very easily go like it's gone the past 2 weeks, or it could be a breakout game for Jamar Chase and he gets like an 80-yard touchdown. I mean, any one of them is possible because he's an elite player. So I would never tell you guys to play J-Mo over Jamar Chase, but we're getting closer to that point. I would still play Jamar Chase over J-Mo this week because I think the breakout at any point could happen as long as they get him the ball in his hands. And I won't say T. Higgins is a must-sit. We're close, but we're not at that point because honestly, the bye weeks into account, the injuries into account, he's not a must-sit. If you're debating between guys like T. Higgins and somebody like Malik Washington in Miami, I think that's a fair question. That's actually a really good start-sit poll to post on the site as well, but I would probably end up going with Malik Washington over T. Higgins. But my point being is that I don't think he's a must-sit because there is opportunity here, and he's continuing to get it, but we're definitely at that point where it's like, if all teams are playing, there's no bye weeks, he probably would move towards being a must-sit option this week. The Washington Commanders at the Los Angeles Chargers. Quentin Johnston's must start. You look at the usage. I mean, the guy is being used as a wide receiver one, basically, in this Chargers offense, along with Ladd McConkey. The usage is there. The bottom line metrics are there. And he's having a legitimate breakout year against a bad defense. I'll take Quentin Johnston over Debo, who I like a lot. Debo's got Jaden Daniels back. He's the only wide receiver that's really healthy in this offense aside from backups. So Debo Samuel is a must start as well this week against the Chargers defense, who's also dealing with their own injuries as well. And then Keenan Allen is the better play than Ladd, but I will say I think Ladd's a good play this week. I've been saying this for weeks. The breakout is imminent. He's being used. The bottom line metrics on FS Roundup, they prove it. They are using him as their wide receiver one still. It just hasn't worked yet. It will work at some point. It could very well be this game against the Washington Commanders. And then Luke McCaffrey, I would also say, is a very playable option this week. The guy has been getting in the end zone. He's been a good red zone target. He hasn't seen that many targets in this offense, but you have to remember Marcus Mariota was the quarterback the past 2 weeks. I think Jaden Daniels, without Terry McLaurin again, without Noah Brown again, could be seeing more targets to Luke McCaffrey or Jalen Lane. That's why I think they're both lower end options, but they're not out of the equation because Jaden Daniels being back changes the game for this Washington Commanders offense. I think there's three very playable options in this matchup at the wide receiver position, but clearly the best two are Quentin Johnston and Debo Samuel. The New England Patriots at the Buffalo Bills, our Sunday night game, very similar. There's a lot of playable options in this matchup, but none of them are must start. Khalil Shakir is my favorite because of his usage over the past couple of weeks and the fact Buffalo's offense I just trust more than the Patriots. But I will say this, there's a revenge game narrative for Diggs. And Diggs had his breakout party last week, so maybe he comes through, has a revenge game, and it could be really good for Diggs. It also could go bad. So I do not want to play him over Khalil Shakir because I could see issues with this one still. Keon Coleman, I'd play him over Kayshon Boutte as well, but I think Boutte is still playable. People call me crazy for this, but I get it. But he's still out there. and he's still being used as basically their wide receiver one when you look at bottom line metrics. Yes, the targets haven't been there as much. I still think they could be there, and he has been a really good player for them this year on a per touch basis. So I think he's the least playable option, but still playable in this matchup. But those other options, Diggs is an interesting one, and I would say Keon is always in the mix, and Khalil Shakir is definitely the best option in this matchup. The Monday night game, to round us out, the Kansas City Chiefs at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Xavier Worthy is must start. The guy looked really good in his first game back last week. I don't even think he was fully healthy, but he looked really good, and I expect him to do really well against the Jags defense. Brian Thomas Jr. is a decent flex option because the bottom line metrics are still there for him. Wide receiver one clearly, and getting a lot of targets as well. Similar to a Ladd McConkey thing where at some point I have trouble believing that the dam won't break, and he has a good game. I think it could be this week, but it also might not be because I've said a lot this week. I think the Jags are going to get exposed in this matchup. But that being said, I'd play him over Tyquan Thornton, who was in my top 30 this week, and I understand how ridiculous it sounded because he only had one target last week. But the chemistry is there with Mahomes, and I do not put it past him to see multiple targets in this game because Hollywood Brown is not someone I can rely on, and neither is Juju Smith-Schuster. So I would play Thornton over Marquise Brown. I would play him over Travis Hunter, who is not involved enough, and I would play him over Juju Smith-Schuster as well. So let me know what your wide receiver room looks like in Week 5, and if you want to see the full top 30 wide receiver rankings for Week 5 fantasy football, click on this video right here.